Sharon Palmer has been a registered dietitian for over 30 years. She's author of The Plant Powered Diet and Plant Powered for Life and a whole bunch of articles. Sharon was raised and schooled in Loma Linda, California, which is now known as a blue zone, one of several blue zones around the world where a focus on plant-based living has been scientifically connected to health and longevity. Hi, Sharon, and how was your holiday?
Hi, how are you? My holidays were great. Yeah.
What did you eat?
Oh, I've been cooking so much. I think that was one of the things with, this kind of a small social gatherings that we're having, just our immediate families. It's just like cooking is kind of like my pastime now. So I actually made this amazing kind of a savory lentil stew with a sage pastry topping. It was so good. So yeah, and then lots of veggie dishes. So it was fun.
I enjoyed, some of the cocktails you put online too. The mint ginger was a mint ginger beer and pomegranate one, I think. That looked really
Yeah, that one was, and I try to make kind of light cocktails. So, I use a lot of sparkling water. It kind of reduces sugar and then it also reduces the alcohol content. So that was fun too.
and one of the great things about eating everything plant-based is you can kinda just keep eating it, and it doesn't really stick around too long is my experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's much lighter, especially if you're really cooking with whole plant foods and you're not adding a lot of extra ingredients. It's very filling. That's one of the benefits of a plant-based diet. You have all the fiber, so it fills you up, but it's a lot lower in calories than other sorts of eating styles. So that's one of the great benefits.
There are so many great benefits, and we're heading into the new year. And I know a lot of people are signing up for Veganuary. I have a friend who's agreed to sign up and try Veganuary, just try it for a month. Have you worked with people who are launching into the Veganuary? Have you met people who've done it? And do you have experience with
Yeah.
the project?
I hear from a lot of people, and I think it's a great way to kick off a healthy eating goal. I've always found that if people are interested in plant based diets, a challenge works really well. I think that that's a great way. Of course, everybody's different, they all have their own individual behaviors and psychology that makes different lifestyle changes work for them, but I find a lot of people benefit from a challenge, so that way it's not like this scary thing where I have to change everything. I'm going to just try it. I'm going to dip my toes in the water, and if I like it, I'm going to keep doing it. And so that's the great thing about Veganuary, is because after the holidays, people are really looking for a health goal. Resolutions are so popular. So Veganuary is just easy, just do it for a month and just see how you like it.
And
You'll
it's kind
probably love it.
Sorry, it's kinda cool that to know that there's all these other thousands of people doing it too, and then
Yeah.
there's support, there's a Facebook group and the Twitter feed and everything, and you can get ideas and recipes and stuff like that. Where would you suggest people start? If you were launching into Veganuary, what kind of advice would you give people to start with?
Well, the one thing I always like to tell people to do is to get prepared for it, because one of the things I hear from so many people that try a plant based diet, and they say it didn't work for them, is because they weren't prepared. And a lot of times they just don't have the things that they need in the kitchen to make delicious, satisfying meals, or they're just not eating balanced meals. So then if you're not eating a balanced meal, you're not going to feel energetic. So you do have to have a certain level of preparation. Not that it's like this really difficult thing to do, but anytime you want to eat a healthy diet, you need to have those ingredients in your kitchen, and you need to have some ideas how to plan a healthy meal and some recipes, to look for. So just a little bit of planning, I think, is very helpful.
I think on your website you have a Go Vegan toolkit that you offer. Would that be helpful for people as they prepare?
Yeah, yeah. It's a free toolkit you can download, and it's just kind of a Kickstarter. So it has like shopping lists, it has meal plans, it has like, some tips on, really how to get started and how to eat a very healthy, nutritionally balanced vegan diet. So that would be beneficial too. I think a lot of people, it's very popular on my website, and I'm trying to give people, advice from a registered dietitian. I'm a registered dietitian, so it's, based on science, and it's, you're going to see a lot of things out there on vegan diets and maybe aren't so science based. So I try to keep that more grounded in what really works.
And I know sometimes when people shift to plant-based, things change. And so some like blood pressure normalizes and cholesterol decreases. And so sometimes people are on medications and I think that it ends up that they don't need so much medication as they
That's
shift to
true.
plant-based, right?
That's a very important point that you made, because and some of these results happen very quickly. So if you do something like Veganuary for the new year, you could find some benefits right away that you might want to like share with your physician. So if you're doing your own blood pressure monitoring, even looking at blood cholesterol, you may not need medications. So it's a good idea, if you are going to make a commitment to a diet like that, to also discuss it with your healthcare practitioner, because they may need to adjust that. I mean, it's very common. I've observed that people can get off their meds, things like, statins for blood cholesterol lowering, or blood pressure medications, or even blood glucose medications. So, not that I would never recommend you to go off those on your own. You should discuss that with your healthcare practitioner. But
Right.
it's pretty common.
Right. And I guess it's nice if you have a healthcare practitioner who's plant-based or vegan. But
Yeah.
even if they're not, I think you can say, you know what, I'm going to try this for a month and I just want you to support me and regulate the meds, right? And I also
Yeah.
think too, I had a friend that I worked with for a while and he went vegan and he sort of did it on the quiet. And all of a sudden I started noticing, you're really losing some weight. Like you look so much more energized and stuff. And then he told me what was going on. And unfortunately, he hadn't taken the before and after shot. I just thought it would be so interesting to have that before and after, like to have all that information and then to
Mhm.
see how it shifts as you go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even like your blood, results, your physician could share them with you to see like what your cholesterol was last year, and then after being on a plant-based diet for a month or something like that. But weight loss is a common occurrence, and research has been pretty consistent in showing that people who eat vegan diets without even doing anything else, just literally eating a vegan diet, weigh less. There have been studies that show people who are vegan weigh an entire category of BMI. On average, they weigh an entire category on BMI lower than omnivorous
And
people.
BMI, can you explain BMI?
So that's body mass index, and there are certain categories. And so we have like the normal BMI, overweight BMI, and obese BMI. And this study found that vegans are one entire category lower when we look at these, categories. And this is just looking at just findings. It's not like related to a weight loss vegan diet. It's just vegans in general. And it's really easy when you look at the diet, when we were talking a little bit about, all these healthy plant foods that you get to eat, and they're very full of fiber. And so fiber really seems to be the thing that scientists think is causing these weight loss benefits, because fiber is probably the highest satiety nutrient we know of right now. We also know that like protein and fat can help with satiety, but fiber is the big one.
Sorry.
So when you eat something with a lot of fiber, it just literally makes you feel full. So you just don't eat as much.
Okay, satiety, that's the feeling of being full. Okay,
Exactly.
gotcha.
The
Okay.
feeling of being full, and even like not just immediately, not it's more than just that feeling of, oh, I ate my whole plate of food, I'm full. It's like this kind of long lasting feeling of being full, because fiber kind of just sticks through, goes through your entire GI tract and has these benefits. And the satiety value, it even starts in the chewing, because research shows that when we eat chewy foods, we get more full, like versus the other spectrum of that is like beverages. You can just suck down a very high calorie beverage in no time. I mean, anybody who's been to Starbucks knows that's true, right? Like all those coffee drinks, and you cannot feel any fullness from like a 700 calorie drink, or, well, you would feel a little bit, but not like eating a meal with beans and whole grains. So even the chewing part starts the satiety right there. And then of course the digestion as it goes through. So that's really the big one of the big benefits of a plant-based diet for weight.
And not a junk food diet, a whole food plant-based diet.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
important. Very important.
Exactly. And I think that's really important because I've been thinking about this lately that, it's wonderful that we have so many vegan products now. It's just like you can find a replacement for everything. But I also see that it's adding a lot of empty calories and junk to our diets. I mean, it's really great that we have all this. I don't get me wrong, but it would be really easy now to eat just as unhealthful as of a diet. Well, not, of course, we're still avoiding red meat and all those kinds of things that we know are health risks. But it would be really easy to stuff your diet filled with sugars and saturated fats and everything by using a lot of these foods that are out there. So I think we're going to start seeing people not really experience the weight benefits if they just go immediately into all of these processed foods that are there.
Right. It really it's about embracing the kitchen, I think, and finding the joy. For me personally, I really didn't enjoy cooking until I became plant-based, and I think partly it was because of the blood and the fat and the gross stuff and the
Yeah.
cleanup, and it was yucky. But cooking with plants is wonderful, and there's no contamination. They're not carrying any diseases home from the store, and but that said, I do always have on hand some frozen veggie burgers or
Yeah.
fake, mock chicken fingers or stuff, just because there's nice snacks every now and then, right? Or if I'm in a hurry and I just need to throw something together, but not every day for sure.
Exactly. I mean, I always have veggie burgers in my freezer, and I like all the plant-based dairy products for cooking, but I try not to, yeah, I mean, I try not to use a lot of these all the time. And I love what you said about cooking, because I'll never forget a chef told me once that, and he's an award-winning chef, said the plants are the things that even on a culinary level that add all the life. They're living and they're colorful, whereas animals are just dead brown things. So chefs are always trying to work with that. And that's really true, because when you're eating plants, that's where all the color, the textures, the flavors, the aromas, and then there's all the seasons to follow. Like you can get all excited, like right now, the winter, there's pomegranates. I have pomegranate trees that I've been picking pomegranates from, and the avocados and the citrus are coming. So there's always something to look forward to and to make things different. Every day you're eating differently. So it is fun. It's fun to cook that way.
So speaking of eating differently, I've heard recently that as we learn more about the gut microbiome, which seems to be a fascinating place, like an ecosystem all to itself, is what I've heard, and that the key really is fiber, 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 and diversity of fiber. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're learning more and more about the gut microbiome, and you explain it very well. It's like this ecosystem in the gut with different microbes, and there are microbes that protect our health, and then there are microbes that are they're kind of negative in terms of our health. So if we have a good balance of the healthy microbes, and we're talking about diversity and volume, so lots of different types of healthy microbes plus lots of them, then it's really based on diet. And literally in the gut microbiome research world, they are looking at vegan diets right now. Like they're looking specifically because that diet has so much fiber in it. So, and there are other things too that the diet has that could be good for the gut, like all the antioxidant compounds. And these microbes, they even help convert all those phytochemicals, which are all those antioxidant compounds we eat in plants. They help convert those into these metabolites that actually are more active. So we need that healthy gut. And Americans have dismal gut microbiome. I mean, just horrific because of the Western diet. I was talking to a researcher who researches the gut microbiome, and they always look at subjects to study, and they were looking for a baseline in the gut microbiome for population and diversity, and they couldn't even find Americans participants that had this baseline for their control group, like Americans just have the worst gut microbiomes. And then we also have the sanitation thing too, which is kind of ironic now that we're going through COVID, but we overdo antibiotics, all these other things in our society. We don't let our kids dig in the soil and play with, we don't work with the soil ourselves. So there's all of this in our environment too, that we're so clean that we're not really like fueling our gut microbiome that way too.
Right. And yeah, I even heard that breathing air, like ocean air or forest air, will impact the gut microbiome. And they say that it's connected to the brain now too.
Yes.
That it seems like the control center. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, our gut brain access, we're learning more about it. And it's really responsible for our immune function, all different kinds of health conditions. We're just learning more and more, even healthy weight. There's a lot that we're learning. And this is relatively new. When I first started studying nutrition, we didn't really understand this. So this is a new world that we're understanding. But even like people who have pets, they have different gut microbiome. If you're around animals, if you were breastfed as a baby, you have a different gut microbiome. If you were a cesarean section versus natural delivery, there's all of these things. And I mean, and if you really think about it, humans evolved in the natural world. We're born naturally, probably in the dirt, so, you were born and you got all these microbes from your mother when you were born, from her skin when you're breastfeeding, even the milk. And then, just being in the natural world, around the earth, animals, all these things, fed us with this diversity. And then we ate a lot of plants, and now we just don't do that very much in general.
Well, there's the shift. I'm holding out hope for the shift towards plant-based living. I think COVID has really awakened a need for healthier lifestyles. And so fiber. How much fiber does meat and dairy have?
None.
Like
That's
zero.
a big thing. Yeah. And Americans have just horrible average intake of fiber. And, we're supposed to be aiming for more like 25 to 38 grams. But, I've analyzed, I don't know if you've done this, but I've analyzed my diet. And sometimes I'm getting like on average 70 to 80 grams of fiber per day, which is a lot of fiber. But I mean, that's a huge benefit. So it has a lot of benefits beyond the gut. Fiber can help lower blood cholesterol levels, blood glucose levels. So there are a lot of benefits.
I heard it described as like a broom. It's like you're sending a broom through your body to sweep away all the cholesterol and clean everything out.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why they think that high red meat diets are linked with colon cancer, because they take a long time. They have a long, what we call transit time through the GI tract. Fiber just pushes things through quickly. So that means all of the environmental toxins that we're getting through our normal lifestyle, we could try our very best, and we're getting those in our systems and our food with a really quick transit time. We're just pushing it through. It doesn't have time to contact the skin and the colon, as the whole colon and lining. But with a low fiber, high red meat diet, there's all this time that there's this exposure, and colon cancer is something that takes time to develop. So this constant exposure to all the toxins in our life, that alone could be explaining why there's a higher risk of colon cancer.
Okay, so as a nutritionist, a dietitian now, I have a friend who, I mean, I've been speaking with you as that all along. But let's say if I was a client of yours, and I swear that I've been trying to eat plant-based, but I get these stomach aches, and I don't feel satiated. I don't feel that full feeling, and until I go, so I eat a little bit of chicken every now and then I just, my stomach ache goes away, and then I feel better. What do you think is going on there?
Well, one thing I think happens with people is they make these huge dramatic shifts in their diet. So if you're eating the Western diet and eating 10 grams of fiber, which is not unheard of, that's not that uncommon in America. If you're just eating this little tiny amount of fiber. And by the way, we were just talking about our gut microbiome. Our gut microbiome is based on our diet. These bacteria are there based on your diet. If you eat a lot of meat, then you have more of the bacteria that help digest, these kinds of foods. If you have, your gut microbiome is very reactive to your diet. So, if you make all of a sudden, just from your Western diet you've been eating for a long time, to eat, this really healthy diet filled with fibers and all these foods that you're not used to, you could experience some symptoms, temporarily. So I always tell people to make more gradual changes. Start, one of the things, if you want to do Veganuary, you could start eating that way now. Even if you just want to do it like 2 days a week, start gradually getting your body used to that. And the other thing is when you are going to do a vegan challenge, try to like gradually increase the fiber. So the fiber kings are beans, the pulses, like dried beans, lentils, peas, and whole grains. And when I say whole grains, I'm talking mostly about intact whole grains like farro or wheat berries or brown rice or quinoa. So if you are eating like, this big heap of beans and sorghum, like whole grain sorghum and broccoli and all this stuff, of course I eat like that all the time. You probably do too. But the first week, you might have to just kind of slow that down a little bit, maybe have the beans and then maybe white rice, that one, just till you gradually get used to that amount of fiber in your diet, So maybe do beans and tofu for dinner, which is a little lower in fiber,
And then like pasta, I guess, is pretty bland in fiber.
Yes, that's another good example. Yeah, just kind of gradually, if you really think about it, beans and whole grains, those are the big ones for fiber. Okay. So, like you suggested, maybe you have like, lentils with brown rice for lunch, and then maybe pasta with some cubed tofu or, tempeh or something. So you're kind of like not overloading it. I mean, once you get used to it, we know that you can get used to a certain amount of fiber. The research shows that you can get used to it, but it's just that little bit of a learning curve. But you're going to notice your body is going to be different. Your digestion will definitely be different when you go to a vegan diet. But it's good because, people who complained about constipation don't have constipation anymore. Like a lot of times I hear that, so because you're getting all this fiber, so, you will see differences in your digestion, but as you slowly increase your fiber, you won't have so many of the symptoms that some people get. But it's also important to think, everybody's individual. I always like to point out, we all have our individual tolerances. I can eat so many beans, I have no impact, but others may have impacts, or like they may have certain foods they're sensitive to, like you may have a little slight allergy to tree nuts, or strawberries may give you a rash, whatever it is. Keep in mind that you have your own sensitivities, and, kind of keep that in mind, and make sure you really eat a diet that works for you, knowing your body and what you tolerate and all that kind of thing.
But there's like a zillion different plants to choose from, right? So if something doesn't work, there's still a zillion others.
Yes. And the other thing to keep in mind is people misdiagnose themselves with food allergies all the time. Oh. I mean, I hear it all the time. People will tell me, oh, I can't eat. And they give me a long list, and I want to go like, when did you are you sure that you can't eat those things? Because if you have food intolerances, there are legitimate allergies. You can see a physician and be evaluated for that. Or if you just have noticed that when you eat certain foods, they don't agree with you, it's a good idea to think, well, what, are you sure it was that food? Maybe that was something else that didn't agree with you. So I always hate for people to exclude foods unnecessarily, because there are a lot of healthy things that why take it out of your diet if it's are you really sure that that's the offending food,
And then I think it can change over time. For a while there, I would have a reaction to pumpkin seeds for some reason. So I quit eating them. And then I ate something that had pumpkin seeds by mistake, and I noticed I didn't have the rash anymore. So our bodies change too, eh?
That's exactly true. In fact, now we know that you can get a food allergy at any time in your life. Like you can get a food intolerance, when you're 60. And you can even get celiac disease later in life. We thought, a long time ago, we thought you were born with it. No, you can get it at a certain time of your life. So it is true that your digestion changes, your tolerances changes. So you can keep that in mind too.
Right. Okay. I'm another client now, and I've had a couple of children, and I don't absorb iron anymore. So I need to eat red meat so I can get my iron.
That's a good one, because I do hear that too. And I think there's a lot of confusion about that. First of all, I recommend, when you eat a plant-based diet, just like everybody should do this, you go to the doctor once a year and have your labs checked. I check my iron once a year. I check my B12 levels, and they're always good. I have never had a problem with iron levels being low. And on average, the average vegan doesn't have a problem with this, according to the research. So I think a lot of people just assume that they're low, or maybe they did have a test with their physician, and instead of maybe the physician's not up on, plant-based, so they just give up, or they start adding something. But before you do that, you can look at your diet. Maybe your diet's not balanced. We do have plant-based iron foods, whole grains, pulses, the beans, lentils, the nuts, seeds. And it's completely possible to get enough iron in your diet. Now, if you are having a little bit of trouble, where even when you're eating those, make sure every meal you're getting, some pulses and whole grains, and you're getting seeds and nuts in your diet every day. Even when you do all that, there are some people that have lower iron levels. So there are other things you can do, like you can have vitamin C rich foods, which helps increase your absorption. But most people who eat a plant-based diet are getting a lot of vitamin C. But if you do it at the same meal, so when you're making sure, you have some fresh vegetables, some bell peppers, strawberries, and citrus, and all of those things with your meal. And the fresher preserves the vitamin C. So trying to have some fresh sources at the meal, that will increase the iron absorption dramatically. Another thing you can do is use a cast iron skillet. I do that. And that will increase I think that's why my iron levels are so high, because they're not overly high, but they're perfect. And I think it's because I use a cast iron skillet a lot. So there are things you can do before you just give up and say, oh, I have to eat this. You can make some changes.
Because physicians, like family doctors, how much time do they study nutrition in medical school?
Very good point. I mean, there was a study that showed about an average of 8 hours for their entire medical education, because there's so many things for them to learn, and there's not a huge emphasis in Western medicine on prevention. So there are a lot of physicians who are fascinated with nutrition and who have done this on their own. And I always like to recommend finding a physician that it enjoys prevention and believes in the power of nutrition. I had one doctor tell me once that I was just so lucky because my labs look so good. Like, you're really lucky you have good genes. I felt like saying, no, this is hard work. It's not hard work, but I mean, those aren't just genes. I have a lot of chronic disease in my genetic pool. So this was my diet and my lifestyle, so, right now I have a physician that really recognizes that balance of Western medicine and the power of prevention. So it's nice to find someone who has that same philosophy.
Absolutely. I've heard a medical doctor say once that, I have a toolkit and I have tools in my toolkit, but I don't have all the tools for everything in my toolkit. So this was as a health cooperative was forming, actually. And so the idea is that there's other professionals within the cooperative that he would refer to, depending on what the diagnosis was.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a wonderful way to do medicine, is to work with other professionals who have, I mean, how much time have you spent studying nutrition, right?
A lot. Yeah. My whole life. Yeah. So yeah, I would highly recommend anybody who wants to, switch to a vegan lifestyle to have at least one appointment with a registered dietitian who is experienced in plant-based nutrition. So that's important, to find someone who knows, because it's a more nuanced area and not every dietitian has those skills. So
Right.
that I think it's because the thing that a dietitian can do for you, of course, you can find amazing books and toolkits out there, but a dietitian can sit down with you and talk to you about what you like to eat. Like, do you have any foods that are your favorite family foods that you grew up with? How can we switch your diet? Like, what is your activity level? What are you like? If you're an athlete, the diet that works for me may not work for you. So to really look at your personal lifestyle and plan and make a plan for you. It's important.
And plant-based dietitians are specifically looking at plant-based research, whereas I think probably other dietitians, it's kind of off their radar a little bit, I would think.
Yes. I mean, that just like our whole medical profession, healthcare profession, plant-based is not a mainstream. I mean, it's becoming more well-known and well-regarded, but it's not that every single healthcare professional has an understanding or an appreciation for it. It has definitely changed in the last 5 years, and it's continuing to change. I see more and more respect for it within the mainstream medical world, but you can't always assume it,
Right. And we can have appointments online now, which is pretty great. We don't have to go anywhere. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned genetics, so that's another question that I hear as well. My mother had breast cancer, so I'm gonna get breast cancer. It doesn't really matter what I eat.
Yeah. I hear that all the time. I feel like it's kind of a little bit of a cop out where people just say, oh, my genes are my fate. I can't do anything. It's like, so I'm going to just do whatever I want. And the research doesn't bear that out. Of course, we know that we have genetic predispositions to certain diseases. You can have a genetic testing done and find out certain genes that you might have. Breast cancer is an example that you might have a gene that creates a higher risk for you to get that breast cancer, for example. And we know that about other conditions, but we also know that you can change the expression of genes to downregulate or upregulate them to actually change how our genes are expressed. And then we also know that, for example, if you have a family history of heart disease, okay, that means genetically you have a higher risk, but you can attack that risk with your lifestyle. And we know that that's true. You may have to be a little more vigilant than the next guy. But we also have to look back because you might assume that you have a high risk of heart disease. But what diet did your father eat or mother eat? So you can't always assume that you do have that genetic risk just because you had, a family member that had that condition. So the bottom line is you can change your genetic expression with diet, and you can even if you are indeed at a higher risk, you can reduce that risk with diet. So, the classic example is heart disease, where people just say, oh, I have a tendency, blood cholesterol levels are high in my family. It's just the way it is. I have to take statins. But, research shows diet is more effective than statins, just period. So, why not just eat the diet and not deal with a drug, that might have side effects, So, that it was always meant to be like you had drugs with lifestyle, but people just started taking the drugs without doing the lifestyle. And, that's why we have so many issues.
Right. Yeah. I've heard it said that the genes are kind of like it's like a light switch, and you can turn it on or off.
Yeah,
What you do is
exactly.
we do have some control, not total control, but it's sort of
Yeah.
like if like I used the example the other day of, well, if you think you might you might have a gene for lung cancer, are you going to start smoking?
Yes.
That's obviously going to affect. And
Right.
it's the same thing with food, right?
Exactly. I mean, diabetes is a classic example where we even know certain cultural populations have a higher risk for diabetes. And it's also like weight accumulation. So central body fat is associated with diabetes. So when people gain weight around their abdomen area, and we know that certain cultural populations we gain weight differently. So societies that tend to have that genetic predisposition to gain weight around the abdomen area, those societies are more tending to get diabetes, type 2 diabetes. But of course, with diet, you could just avoid that central, adiposity. You could just avoid that weight gain around the middle even though you know that you're genetically susceptible to gaining weight around the middle, you can do something about it with exercise and diet. So then you kind of cut that genetic risk right there.
Hmm. I find it fascinating to know that the source of diabetes now they're finding has to do with fat in the cells more than insulin production. Have you
Yeah, there's
looked at that?
yeah, I know. There's a lot of interesting stuff about that, as well as insulin sensitivity. So, when we have type 2 diabetes, you just keep having to pump out more insulin, so your body becomes less sensitive to it, and then eventually you just, your pancreas gets tired. It's not working as effectively. So, there are a lot of correlations to body fat with prediabetes, type 2 diabetes. So that is a huge factor alone, is just weight, like just losing weight, or, achieving a healthier weight, especially abdominal weight. That alone can really make a big difference. But then there's also the blood glucose levels. Diet, independently and directly affects blood glucose levels. So it's a matter of preserving your insulin, making it more effective. And by exercising, keeping the weight at a healthier level, diet is all linked together.
Okay. All right. Okay, now I know that you told me you have been doing a deep dive into the sustainable food systems course that I think you took this year over the
Yeah.
holidays. Can you share some of what you're learning from that?
Well, I finished, I don't know if I told you that I finished my master's degree in sustainable food systems.
All right.
And now I'm teaching a class at Prescott College on sustainable diets. I'm
Oh,
associate.
cool. That's
Yeah, I'm
great.
associate
Congratulations.
faculty there on top of my other work in plant-based nutrition. So, and I've been more involved in a project called foodandplanet.org, where it's with some of my colleagues, and we're really trying to help educate healthcare professionals about sustainable food systems. So, like the healthcare professionals, dietitians, doctors, nurses have a huge amount of influence over behavior. So while we're talking about how to eat a healthy diet, let's also talk about a sustainable diet at the same time. And our research showed that there's a very low understanding among healthcare professionals about sustainability. They didn't get that education. We were just talking about, nutrition education is poor. Can you imagine sustainability education? So we're really trying to fill that gap and educate the healthcare providers so that they can help educate and empower people, about how to eat a more sustainable diet and how to have a more sustainable lifestyle. So this is something I'm really passionate about right now.
So, what does that look like? Growing your own food, shopping locally, that sort of thing?
Well, we're looking at all the different factors. Of course, a plant-based diet is one of them. That's a huge thing. Meat reduction is a huge thing. But also, like you said, local food sources, trying to use more local food sources, growing your own food, reducing food packaging. Food waste is a huge one. 30 to 40% of our food is wasted. So you think about all of that goes into producing food. Um, Beverage choices are a huge sustainability issue. So most sustainable beverage is drinking water out of your tap. I mean, if you think about just the impact of our beverages, like if you're buying everything in bottles, just what it takes to ship that around the world, to package it in petroleum-based plastics. So there are a lot of things, the research really shows that diet could be the number one thing in your own individual life that you could do to reduce your environmental footprint. It's more powerful than the car you drive. So just think if every single person, could change their diet. And in the UK, they did this study where they kind of listed these guidelines for the people in UK, what they could do with their diet. The very things I was just talking about, and they could reduce climate change by 34% just by doing that in the population of the UK. So it's a very powerful thing. Also, like seafood is another area that's a big sustainability issue. So, we have a lot of people that are pescatarians, but, like if you're choosing unsustainable seafood, that could be another thing you could work towards. So,
Is there such a thing as sustainable seafood, though, really?
Yeah, well, that's that's a huge thing. That's probably, I was a pescatarian at one time. And then when I really started doing the research on our oceans and it just became clear to me that it was time. And then I went to lacto ovo and then I went to vegan it's almost been 10 years. So that's another thing I see that people make these shifts. And I think that's another way. If you're really interested in plant-based, maybe start with lacto ovo and then try that for a month and then go to vegan. Like if that is a way that works for you, I see a lot of people doing that. I hear people all the time are making these jumps, like they're doing one thing and taking the next jump. So I'm all about trying to get people on that path to going that direction.
Yeah, I was like that for a long time, but now with COVID and the mutations, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, no, just go vegan. Just go
Yeah.
vegan. And then if that doesn't work, then maybe you can add something back in, I guess. But I'm confident that just going vegan is really, because I mean, lacto milk is really,
Yeah,
it's nasty for the skin.
I totally get where you're coming from. That's why I eat the way I do.
It,
And the thing that's really great about something like Veganuary, from my personal experience, when I was vegetarian and then I went to vegan, I mean, it was not as hard as I thought it was going to be. And I felt so good. Physically, I felt good. And I had immediate health benefits. But then, I mean, I just felt so good about my position in the world. Like literally, my lifestyle, I wasn't hurting animals. I had the lightest footprint on the planet. I mean, research dramatically over and over again shows that vegans have the lowest environmental footprint. I mean, it's very consistent. So I felt like, okay, this is my contribution to the planet. I'm doing the best I can. I mean, now there's other things I can do. I can grow more of my own food. I can get solar panels. I can do this and that. But really, that's like one big step. And it was such a positive feeling, and I think that's what's great about Veganuary or taking a vegan challenge is to experience that whole, process.
right. And there, I mean, I think if you do it right, there's no going back. There,
Yeah.
for me, there's especially knowing about what happens behind the scenes with the animals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want any part of that. I think there's no going back. I mean, I hear about people who they go vegan, like, and then they like, and sometimes famous people, and they get a great following, and we're all excited because, oh, so and so went vegan, isn't that great? And everybody's going vegan, and then they decide, oh, you know what? Actually, I'm not vegan anymore. It's like, no,
I know. I can't. I'm
right?
always a little nervous about that too. I get so excited, and it's like you can't keep track of whether they're following. And I think part of the problem is it kind of became like a weight loss diet or something. And I
Right.
feel like it's a lifestyle. I've never been an advocate, even as a dietitian, in going on a diet. It should be your way of eating for life. It should be something you can live with, that you feel good about. You shouldn't feel deprived. You should feel, sustained by your diet. You shouldn't, like, that's why I have many issues with the keto diet. But one of them is it's just such a horrific diet to live on. Like, how can you ever have any kind of normal life, So, that again, I think when people approach a vegan diet just as a weight loss diet I'm going on, then it's just a different thing.
Yeah, I'm telling everybody, watch Earthlings or Dominion. They're both documentaries on YouTube, and that is the best inspiration for. And then make sure you're doing it right. Oh, now there's two things I've heard other plant-based physicians mention, that you really don't even need any multivitamins if you're doing the whole foods plant-based diet. But there's the B12 and D3. They say you got to get those. The D comes from the sun, and
Mhm.
B12 is a bacteria. Is that right? And do you agree with
Yeah, B12 you have to supplement. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. There was one study that found only 50% of vegans are taking B12.
that?
And B12 deficiency is serious stuff. It has neurodegenerative effects. So you have to be, you can't just say, oh, I'm doing fortified foods. And you can get B12 in fortified foods like plant milk, but if you have to be consistent. So I find it just easier. You can get the 1000 milligram tablets. Recommend 2 of those per week. So then, or something like 240, 250 micrograms per day. but you have to be diligent about that. And then vitamin D is interesting because it's not just plant-based people who don't get enough vitamin D. Vitamin D really is found in the sun. The other place you could get it is fish, but it's not in our diets. It's fortified in milk. So milk does not have it naturally. It's a fortification process. Now, plant-based milk, I actually I like to use fortified plant-based milk because I always have plant-based milk in my kitchen. I use it for everything from my coffee to my oatmeal. So I know if I get the fortified, I'm getting a little vitamin D in there. And I have to tell you a story about calcium. That's another nutrient people think they're not going to get enough of. I just recently had my bone mineral density test, and it wasn't just good, it was excellent.
Wow.
Like they were like, what did you do? What are you doing right? And I have to say, I was a little like, okay, I hope I've been doing, because your bones are built over years. And I was like, okay, did I get it right? I was so pleased. So, I'm living proof that you can eat a vegan diet and have healthy bones, but it's, that there are a lot of nutrients that are important for bone health, and vitamin D is one of them. But back to vitamin D, we humans always got it from the sun. We live near the equator at one point, and then we started, moving all over the planet to climates that had very little sun exposure. And it was an evolutionary process. It changed all sorts of factors about humans in order just to get vitamin D. So I live in California. I, even with me living here, I go for a walk every day. I have a garden. I'm still not getting enough vitamin D on a regular basis. So I do take vitamin D. And that's one thing I have checked when I go for my annual checkup. I have my vitamin D checked. But this is typical of all, humans in Western societies where we're working indoors. It's not just a vegan issue, but most people should be taking vitamin D.
I have to tell you an interesting little tidbit about the Canadian health system, which is sort of being held up as an example of something better than what you folks have, which, it's a pretty low bar, quite frankly. But strangely enough, our Canadian health system, it's good, but it's not great. It's not excellent like your bone health. If I want to get my vitamin D tested, I can go to my doctor. I think I get 15 minutes at, an appointment. They're on a clock. They get paid by the 15-minute appointment. And that's usually enough time to do a quick scan of things, and I have a quick chit chat. And she'll send my tests in, and I can get those without a charge, and that's all great. Mm-hmm. Except for vitamin D. Now, I live in an area that is a temperate rainforest. It used to be. It's logged at an outrageously fast rate. It's horrifying. But it rains and it's gray. That's what it is. Yeah. But they want to make me pay, I think it's like $60 for a vitamin D test. Now, to me, that does not make any sense at all.
I know. That's a prevention thing. Vitamin D status is, pretty low hanging fruit. This is the whole idea that we should be investing in prevention, and we know that vitamin D is linked with all sorts of not only healthy bones, but cancer and, immune function. So that's kind of sad.
It is. It doesn't make sense. So when you guys are shopping for a new healthcare system, be good shoppers. We're not perfect. But the other thing about vitamin D is I'm careful to get a vegan sourced D3.
Yes, that's a very important note, because it could be from animal. Vitamin D, especially D3, could be an animal source. So whenever it comes to supplements, it's always good, because even the gelatin capsule could be contain animal products. So I always look for, that it's vegan, or even if it's vegetarian, it'll probably be vegan, because there are a few examples where vegetarian might not exactly be vegan, but sometimes they're labeling it vegetarian capsule, and it would also be vegan because it wouldn't have dairy products in it. But yeah.
Gelatin, yeah. Yeah, and thankfully more and more things just have the V on them now, and it's so much easier.
I think it's one of the great things about the growing trend for plant-based.
Right. Losing my eyesight trying to read these labels on things. It seems like, okay. Well, we're almost out of time, but before we go, I wanted to ask you another question. So, like a lot of people, I'm spending a lot of time online these days, and there's a discussion in our group Somebody was having a conversation with Christians at this time
Oh
of
yeah.
year,
Hmm.
and trying to find examples in the Bible. Thou shalt not kill is sort of why we don't need and shouldn't be using and dominating animals. And the question came, well, what about the Seventh Day Adventists, where you're have emerged from? This is the people that are part of the Blue Zone,
Hmm.
are primarily vegetarian, and I've shown now they've been studying them long enough to prove that they're the healthiest people on the planet. So they're wondering what was it about the Seventh Day Adventists that they were able to kind of branch out and realize that we don't need to be doing this.
Yeah, I was raised in a Seventh Day Adventist home. I'm not um, a Seventh Day Adventist any longer, but I'm very familiar with that background. And um, the thing about that group is they had their own kind of writings and teachings that were in addition to the Bible. And these were very much based on the idea that the body is like a temple, and that preserving the body is just a fundamental part of that particular their belief system. And they had very detailed writings about how you would preserve the body, and meat consumption was a big one. I mean, there were certain meats that were completely forbidden, such as pork and most seafood, and um, there were certain fish that were, I mean, there's certain fish that were allowed, and chicken, but the whole idea was to try to strive towards being completely plant-based. So there's a very high rate of vegetarianism. It was always presented like the goal is to be completely plant-based, but at a bare minimum, no alcohol, no pork, no coffee, even very, very like basic, lots of fruits and vegetables, healthy foods, it was a huge foundation of a principle of that religion. So with this overarching goal that to try to achieve being completely plant-based. So there's a very high rate of vegetarianism and veganism among Seventh-day Adventists. And even with those that aren't vegetarian and vegan, they're eating a very plant-based diet. Even though they may not 100% be achieving vegan or vegetarian, they're really, really low meat consumption. So that was an interesting thing. And because you had this kind of homogenous group of people because of their beliefs, it was ideal for doing research studies. So at Loma Linda, they were doing the first studies on vegetarian diets, and vegan diets, because they had this cohort, this group of people, and they could literally categorize them. Do you eat a vegetarian diet, a vegan diet? So they had 5 groups of diets. They've been studying them for, decades. So they were the first, studies that showed the benefits. Because, when I went to school, even though I went to school at Loma Linda, which was plant-based, the body of scientific evidence frowned upon vegetarian diets or vegan diets. It was all about, my nutrient deficiencies, it was almost like it's a dangerous thing, and now, because of those studies, and then of course now we have studies from all over the world, it really showed that no, they're not dangerous. They even are beneficial. So, but that it's interesting because you could take that population and you could take out things like alcohol and smoking. They also don't smoke. And then they have other healthy behaviors that were identified in the blue zones. Like, as in many religious communities, you have a lot of social structure, social support, which is so important for health. It's so much more than just diet and exercise. It's having people that care about you. It's about taking care of your older people and not just forgetting about them. All of those things add so much. That's what the blue zones really pointed out, is that it's more than just diet. But the studies really were able to get things like alcohol out of the equation, smoking, and literally just look at diets.
Mhm.
So
Cool.
they really overall found that the most plant-based diet, the better, in their research. And they looked at all sorts of things. They've looked at hypertension, heart disease, cancer, different types of cancer. They've looked at things like blood cholesterol, insulin, and blood glucose levels, inflammation, and then even environmental footprint. And they found out that, going to semi-vegetarian were benefits, and it was like a linear benefit. So going from regular diet to omnivorous to semi-vegetarian. There were benefits down to pescatarian benefits, down to vegetarian benefits, all the way to vegan had the best benefits, the lowest impact on the environment. So, and the thing that was so interesting about those studies is that they did this whole kind of a plot diagram of what those people actually eat. And it's so beautiful because you can actually see when you're a vegan on the Adventist Health Studies, you're just off the charts compared to the average person, how many avocados you eat. Like vegans eat so many more avocados than the average person. Nuts, whole grains, it's like off the chart, just the number of vegetables. And when you see it all laid out like that, you can go, of course there are health benefits. Look at the way they're eating. They're just off the charts on all these things we know are so good for you. So when you're not eating meat and all those things, you have room for eating all these other really good things.
Right. And I think it's kind of a baseline now, those studies for all the other research. Now there's other research. And I really enjoyed your interview with Jasmine, who's
Oh, yeah.
born vegan. I mean, we have these people in our world now. They were in utero, they were vegan, and now they're in their 20s, and we can see the results, right?
Yeah, we have decades of that, knowing that even with the limited knowledge we had back then, about nutrition, we have generations of, and there's no evidence that there are issues with, problems later on, so, and it's great because we even know more now about, like B12 and like, iron and omega-3s. So we have more information. So it's even going to have better results, I would anticipate.
Right. Okay. Well, let's hope Veganuary is a huge, big success again. It seems to grow every year. And then those people, of course, will influence all of their friends and family. And we can get out of this whole zoonotic virus mess. And just there's like, I saw a great sign the other day on a building on a photo that someone had posted, and it said, "There's never been a virus outbreak at a tofu factory."
That's true. Well, that plant-based went up during COVID too. I'm sure you've seen the data that people were eating more plant-based. So, and I think it's because of things like, more attention about our whole food system, what's happening in slaughterhouses and everything. So yeah, it's a good thing.
And okay, now, so before we go, then we want to plug your website for sure, SharonPalmer.com, right?
Yeah, I have lots of free resources on plant-based living, the toolkit, the Go Vegan toolkit. I also have a plant-based pantry toolkit to help you plan, like planning your whole pantry, which is often really left out. Like if you're going to make the shift to vegan, you really need to get your pantry in order. And so I have all these free toolkits. I also have a free home gardening toolkit. So when spring comes around, I'm always encouraging people to grow some of their own food, and lots of recipes and lots of nutrition science. I try to do science updates and just articles on how to live a more sustainable plant-based diet. So there's a lot of stuff there. And I also have a new book coming out called California Vegan. It's coming out in March, California Vegan.
Okay.
And it's about, it's interesting because we were just talking about Loma Linda, but the history of veganism really has a big foothold in California. A lot of it arose out of California for many different factors. And so I kind of talk about some of the history and some of the eating styles. And it's a very hopefully inspirational book about how to kind of make your vegan lifestyle a little bit more exciting, maybe some ideas for, kind of celebrating a lifestyle that's kind of like that more Mediterranean influence. So that's fun. Lots of recipes and some interesting stories. So that's coming out, and you can actually pre-order it now on Amazon.
Wow. I don't know how you find the time for all of these many things. And so it's not just for people who live in California.
Exactly. I keep telling everybody you could make these recipes anywhere, but hopefully it just kind of gives you a little bit of inspiration to make your cooking and your lifestyle a little bit different.
Okay. And you have a great newsletter that comes out with the photos. Do you take those photos yourself?
Yeah, I really love food photography. I live in Ojai, California, which is like this, it's just a very beautiful place. filled with farms. And I have this perfect sunny window in my home that I take all my photos at. So when you see photos on my site, those are foods that we're eating in my family and we're cooking in my kitchen.
Wow, it's so amazing. You're such an inspiration, Sharon. And thank you so much for taking the time today for this.
Well, thank you for all that you're doing. It's an important thing. And I certainly hope we have a lot of people giving Veganuary a try.